What exactly is a gamer? And after finding the answer to that age-old question, here's another one. What kind of gear does a gamer want? There are a lot of layers to this conundrum, and it seems that ASUS is working to figure out exactly what that means. After all, the Republic of Gamers can be chock full of many different kinds of, well, gamers. And with the latest version of their flagship smartphone, I think we can see that ROG is becoming even more, let's say, inclusive than ever. Hey, it's Joshua Vergara. What's going on, everybody? Here's what worked and what didn't with the ASUS ROG Phone 8 Pro. Now, before we get into the meat of this perspective on ASUS's powerful gaming smartphone, we had to take a moment and look at the unboxing experience. ASUS tends to do a bang-up job of making their unboxings pretty special, and the ROG Phone 8 Pro is no exception. After taking each layer off one by one, going beyond the phone reveals a bit of a playground to showcase the features of the device. It's basically a game before the Android setup, showing off not just the great visuals from the display, but also how loud the speakers sound. And of course, it's a way of showing off the air triggers, which come in handy for plenty of the mobile games you might be playing on this device. This might be the best smartphone unboxing experience I'm going to have all year. When you think of ASUS and certainly ROG, you might think RGB everything, and that has been the case for ROG phones over the last number of years. This year, however, ASUS decided to tone things down a bit and adopt a more minimalistic style. Still, one that I think looks really good. A matted backing is slit down the middle with a line reminiscent of the letter A design you might recognize from other ROG products, with ASUS branding found littered in the corners. Those who actually enjoy the all-in nature of gamer designs will appreciate the hard angles in the camera bump at least, and the hidden light-up panel found under the lower half of the phone. That's right, you've been seeing it already. The anime vision arrives in the ROG Phone 8 Pro with simple white diodes providing a canvas for light-up notifications, as you can see here, audio visualizers, or maybe even a little bit of personalization. You get out of the anime vision panel what you put into it because you can actually create patterns and animations yourself. Otherwise, it's just a nice place to get a glimpse at your battery life, the time, and an overall number of notifications while the phone is lying face down. Really, a little can go a long way here. And also the fact that the light-up panel can't be seen when it's not in use, like it's literally hidden here, just adds to how stealthy this phone manages to be both inside and out. Gamers will probably find this front side a little bit more of a polarizing change. While previous ROG phones made no concessions in terms of the screen real estate by allowing for large bezels at the top and bottom of the screen, this time things are simply sleeker and more compact. This might be a little bit contrary to what some gamers want. The thinner bezels up here and below means that there's less grip space during gameplay, especially in landscape mode, and it also means a relocation of that bottom speaker from a front firing position to a bottom firing area here on the frame. The other part that marks a step backward, the front-facing camera is now a cutout in the display, meaning that there is either something cutting into your content or you're forced to render below that area and lose a little bit of room anyway. These are places where I definitely think ASUS decided to step back a bit in order to appeal to a wider audience, one that is trying to marry power with sleek. Okay, the tea is ready, and it's in a new way of making tea that might be one of my favorites recently. You saw it at the beginning, and that was filmed on the ROG Phone 8 Pro. Basically, you put the leaves up here, the water, and there's a button here that allows you to just... Sometimes it's the fun little things that just make all the difference. In any case, for today's tea break, I think I want to lean into the fact that I'm doing tea a little bit differently. Does this mean that I'm any different from anyone that does like gongfu type tea? No, this is just one way of doing the same exact thing, which is enjoying tea. Does this understated design actually mean that the ROG Phone 8 Pro is not appealing to those hardcore gamers? As I'm going to be saying a lot in this video, yes, it is, because the performance is still top notch, and we'll get more into that later, but really, it's just sort of appealing to different types of gamers, trying to be more inclusive. And that's something that I want to impart during this tea break, which is the idea that two things can be true at once. You could be a gamer that really loves just like diving into mobile games like Mobile Legends or Genshin Impact or Honkai Star Rail, but you also don't necessarily need all of the flashy RGB everything. So whether it's about gaming or pretty much anything else in your life, just remember, two things can be true at once. Let me know your thoughts on that kind of perspective, but also let me know in the comments downstairs what's going on, everybody. This is a chance for us to just sort of kick it together in the middle of videos like this, because I hope you come for the tech, but you stay for the tea. All right, let's get back to the ROG Phone 8 Pro. But despite the simpler design, you still get everything a smartphone could and maybe should provide. Air triggers for a bit more by way of controls in games and maybe shortcuts, a headphone jack, and dual USB-C ports in case you're doing something while charging. You can see one of those ports here on the side, and this is a feature that I didn't even know I would really appreciate until I actually had to use it. On a recent trip, I decided to get on the plane with wired USB-C headphones, and these are actually made by ASUS no less, and I at one point needed to charge the phone while still listening to my downloaded YouTube videos. The only weird part is that the USB-C port here on the bottom is off to the side, which can feel a little bit awkward depending on the use case scenario. The main situation where it felt weird was when I was trying to use this phone in something like a backbone gaming controller. Speaking of gaming, there's no denying that this is about as powerful as an Android phone can get right now. ASUS outfits the ROG Phone 8 Pro with the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3, capable of running all of the games that are in the Play Store at full settings for longer than most other phones. That kind of power is supported by a cooling system that, because of the design of the phone, no longer includes a fan, so this isn't going to be like a supercar of smartphones like last time. Instead, there's a combination of cooling solutions, including a graphite layer and a vapor chamber cooling, which all help keep the graphics going proper for longer. And then that all emanates out of an AMOLED display that pumps out 165Hz refresh rate. All of this would mean something more to me if I was still a fiend for Genshin Impact or I was further addicted to Honkai Star Rail. But for my intents and purposes of Marvel Snap and actually revisiting the original Baldur's Gate after finishing Part 3, this phone is seriously way more than enough for how I game. And that kind of power means that the phone can handle all of the regular work and play of basically any other high-end smartphone. No surprise there. In fact, like with computers and laptops, sometimes you lean more into the powerful gaming rigs so that you know you're covered with everything else that you want to do. Unless that extra thing you want to do on this phone is content creation. Now I know this part is really specific to someone like me, but I put a lot of stock into the cameras of smartphones that I review, and the ROG phones have been no exception. There was once a time when the ROG phones were actually not that far off in camera quality from other flagship competition, but the gap has gotten wider and wider with the advent of things like 1-inch sensors and AI software processing. Simply put, the ROG Phone 8 Pro doesn't dive too far into any of that, and the result is a camera package that might feel like it fits better into a gamer-centric product anyway. It's just a practical necessity that doesn't need to go beyond the realm of decent. And that's exactly what this phone camera manages to do. Take very decent photos and videos, particularly from the main sensor. Now, that sensor is a respectable IMX890. The quality of the sensor is well documented in plenty of phones, but it's been around for a while. At least ASUS takes things a step further by still having their homegrown gimbal-like stabilization system to make sure movements don't mess with the end result. This is especially appreciated for videos, as steady footage is easy to get on the main sensor. But good main sensors are a given in almost any smartphone these days, so where the ROG Phone 8 Pro falls behind is in the supporting cast. The 13-megapixel ultrawide is again decent. And on the other end of the spectrum, the 32-megapixel telephoto lens does provide a 3x reach. Another head-scratcher is that 4K video recording is only available on the main and the ultrawide sensors. If you go over to the Full HD resolution, you can see that the 3x finally appears, but once you go to 4K, it goes away. The same limitation is also on the front-facing camera, so high-resolution video is just not something you'll get on this front-facing shooter. I also noticed that the quality is a bit hit or miss, especially when it comes to the video calling that I was doing with this phone. Sure, I have good lighting right now, so this looks pretty decent. However, any less lighting than this during video calls, and this is not the best performer. This camera takes decent enough selfies and portrait shots, but that's about all I could find myself using the front shooter for. I don't think anyone out there is really expecting the ROG Phone 8 Pro to dazzle in the camera department, especially when other phones are just going to go ham on the hardware or on the AI upgrades. But the fact remains that those advancements are widening the gap among the different offerings available, and the ROG Phone 8 Pro simply is focusing elsewhere. Aside from the camera, most of this phone is still quite extra. I've already touched upon this in the design section, but the little touches from the anime vision panel to the air triggers that are right over here, they really set this phone apart and draw the gamer line in the sand compared to other premium flagships. But some of the other extras are more than skin deep. There are certain things that ASUS brings to their smartphones that just make total sense, and we don't really see it a whole lot in other phones. For example, dual-band Wi-Fi means that you're getting the full speed from your Wi-Fi router by connecting to its multiple bands simultaneously, while Gaming the Armory Crate app provides more settings and capabilities. If you're stuck in any given game, there's an overlay that you can use AI with in order to figure out where you are and search the internet automatically to figure out your next step. Macros can also be programmed to make certain button combinations easier, like hitting the attack button consistently in Diablo to grind out some levels, and finally turning everything up to 11 when launching games ensures performance performance is top notch. And let's not forget about the AeroActive Cooler X attachment. This thing has a dual purpose. Let me just go ahead and get this attached real quick. Actually, I guess you could say it has a triple purpose, because one of the first things it does is it provides that RGB that you might be missing. But really what this is doing is providing a lot of effective cooling to the back of the device while also giving you extra buttons for further control. And it's a really effective fan. You can actually feel a little breeze coming from it already. I'm always a fan of something like this that can serve multiple purposes, but this extra did also take a step back too. You see, last year's cooler also served as a bit of a subwoofer to add further richness to the phone's already loud speaker set. The speakers on the Phone 8 Pro are still nice and loud, enough to make me forego a small Bluetooth speaker on recent trips, but that subwoofer addition was a level of extra that I really appreciated. I just wish it stuck around. As I said before, these features do end up being useful for more than games usually. The air triggers help open up a new way of getting places in ASUS's flavor of Android. The bottom trigger can register a squeeze of the phone that opens up an app or triggers another function. To the opposite end of the X mode performance mode, you can also get way more battery life out of the Phone 8 Pro by going ultra durable, which I definitely had to use once or twice while running around Mobile World Congress recently. And speaking of the battery, it's still a rare to see 5500 mAh capacity that can now be charged wirelessly as well. To top up in a hurry though, the fast wire charging is still the way to go. Gaming phones just tend to have more to offer in multiple respects compared to more mainstream phones. And while there is a shift happening in the ROG phone lineup that make it more mainstream itself, you still get a lot of the DNA of ROG. So what does that all amount to when plenty of other phones can handle all of the mobile games just fine too? Well, I can totally understand that sentiment, but I think it can go a little bit further. You see, flagship smartphones are clearly powerful enough, but also, mobile gaming is not really pushing the boundaries to a point where massive change has to happen in those markets. The only platform that recently has made a real leap in a different direction is over on the Apple side, because developers have decided to adopt those architectures and bring their AAA titles over there. But even then, the selection is pretty bare. I hope that developers like that can try to port their games to Android, maybe by just adopting specific high-end chipsets, like the one found in this phone, and by adopting their respective architectures. But those are questions that will be answered by people way smarter than me. On the other hand, mobile games are an intensely lucrative business, and they rake in way more money more consistently, so gaming phones like this still have a place in the market. Those of you who in the US can't fathom the idea of paying money in MOBAs or in Genshin Impact, you may not realize just how many people actually do that in Asia and India, and it's just a way of life. Besides, you probably know people in your lives that are addicted to Roblox or Fortnite, and they do the exact same thing. So somewhere in the middle of all of that are gamers who are looking for all the power that they need to dominate in Pokemon Unite or Mobile Legends, but might not need the bells and whistles that previous ROG phones used to flaunt. Sure, those who want their phones to be a bit more bombastic will have a bit of an adjustment here, but I think ASUS has struck an effective balance here. This is still a gamer-styled phone, even if it doesn't scream it. So, for those of you who can afford it, the ROG Phone 8 Pro still has an audience. It's definitely a more mainstream device, but make no mistake, the ROG Phone 8 Pro is still a mobile gamer's paradise, and now that just includes mainstream gamers. So tell me, what mobile games do you play? You're certainly covered on literally any of them when using the ROG Phone 8 Pro, but does the new styling speak to your sensibilities? I want to know your thoughts in the comment sections downstairs, but from there, I'm going to go ahead and call it on this long video. Thank you so much for kicking it with me again today. Please take care of yourselves and each other, and enjoy your tea, everybody.